This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
Bread pudding is a dessert that you can find all over the world. In this variation, I'm going to be using croissants in the pudding and making a sauce made with Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey. So the first thing we want to do is make the custard part for the pudding, and we start by cracking 2 whole eggs into a medium bowl. Then we're going to go ahead and start separating 4 additional eggs. What we want is just the yolk. So in this medium-sized bowl, we're going to have 2 whole eggs and 4 egg yolks. Now to the eggs, we're going to add 2.5 cups of milk, 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Then you want to get your whisk and you want to really get these ingredients well mixed. You want to make sure those eggs are broken up so that they will cook into a nice custard. Then we're just going to set that aside and we're going to get some sort of baking dish out. I'm using an oval one today. And then for our bread, I'm going to be using some stale croissants. I had some left over from a tea that I had, and I'm going to fit those into the pan. Now it looks like I'm using about 5 at the moment. And what I then want to do is split the croissants. And I'm going to put the bottoms all in the bottom of this pan. Now you don't need to butter the pan or anything like that. Just go ahead and make a layer of the stale croissant. Then we want to get some raisins, and we want to place those real carefully on top of the bottoms of the croissants. And the reason we want to be careful with it is because raisins have such a high sugar content, they have a tendency to burn. So it's almost like you're making a raisin sandwich at this point. You've got your lower half of the croissant, then we're going to put, a tablespoon or so of raisins gingerly placed on top. And then we're going to go ahead and put the tops of the croissants on top of the raisins. So again, it's like we're making these raisin croissant sandwiches in this dish. Now, once we get all the tops put on, then you just go ahead and pour all of that custard. Now, notice how the croissants start to bob to the top. Well, what we want to do is kind of let this mixture with the croissants sit for about 10 minutes or so. And what I do is at the beginning, I use my hands to kind of place them, down towards the bottom. Then I use my whisk. And this is why we want to use the stale croissants, is because they have lots of air holes in them. And so what's going to happen is that custard is just going to get soaked up in all that nice croissant bread. Now, as I'm doing this, you're going to find that you've got little areas as the croissants kind of move in that liquid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take little halves of croissants and I'm going to put the bottom in, put just a few little raisins on top, put that top back on, and I basically want to fit as many of these croissants filled with raisins as I can in this dish. So here's another spot in the center that I can fit the other half of that croissant. So again, I put the bottom in, put a few more raisins, and then go ahead and place that. One of the beauties of this dish is that custard is just going to cook and envelop all of that croissant, so they won't seem as individual as they do now. But again, just keep pressing that down every now and then for about 10 minutes. Now, after 10 minutes, you'll notice they're not bobbing up anymore. They're starting to become filled with our custard, which is just great. Now, we're going to be baking this in a water bath, so let me show you how we put that together. You want to get a pan that's bigger than your casserole dish. I'm just using my roasting pan because that's what I've got on hand. And then you want to take some warm water from the tap and start filling that into your roasting pan. It should go about halfway up the sides of your casserole dish. Make sure you don't get any water inside the casserole. Then we're going to put some foil on top. And the reason we're doing this is the first half of cooking time, we're actually going to be steaming this pudding. And that's going to help that custard stay nice and moist. Once you get the foil on, take a knife and put some holes in so that the steam can vent. And then we're going to put this into a 350-degree oven. You're going to want to move carefully because you do have that water in there. And this is going to bake with the foil on for about 30 minutes. Then after 30 minutes, pull the rack out and we're going to take the foil off. And what's happened now is that custard has sort of steamed, which is just great. But we do want it to brown a little bit. So we're going to slide it right back into the oven for another 30 minutes. Because it's cooking in that water bath, it's going to cook nice and evenly. Then after the second 30 minutes, we're going to go ahead and pull it out of the oven. Be very careful. The pan is heavy and that water is really hot. Once we get it out, take a knife and check. Make sure that it comes out clean. That tells you that the custard is cooked through. And then using your oven mitts, carefully lift the bread pudding out of the water bath and just set it aside and it can cool. Well, bread pudding is great, but bread pudding with a Jack Daniel's sauce is unbelievable. So what we're going to do is in a small saucepan, we're going to put in 4 tablespoons of butter, a half a cup of sugar, and then we want to separate out 1 egg yolk. And we're going to go ahead and before we put that in, we want to kind of whisk that up just a little bit or lightly beat it with a fork. Put that in. And then the last thing is 2 tablespoons of water. Now I want to have this on a medium-low heat. Again, we're cooking eggs, so we have to make sure we do it a little carefully. And if you do it on a low heat, you'll be fine. Now this sauce takes about 5 or 6 minutes to get going. And once it starts to come to a boil like this, it is ready to go. Now you'll notice we haven't put the Jack Daniel's whiskey in yet. That comes now at the very end. So once the sauce starts to boil, we pull it off the heat and we put in 2 tablespoons of Jack Daniel's and we whisk that in. Now this sauce is best served warm. So many times I make this while I'm making the coffee for dinner because it comes together so quickly. So then what you want to have is a warm or room temperature bread pudding along with this great warm Jack Daniel's sauce. Well, this is not your grandma's bread pudding. It's rich and buttery because of using the croissants. The custard is nice and moist, and that Jack Daniel's sauce is fantastic. Well, if you'd like to get the recipe for this dessert, just go to our website and visit the Sweet World show notes. I'll have the recipe there for you. And as always, if you have any questions, send me an email. I'll see you next time.